Hello and welcome to the Doof Book Club, our monthly live stream discussion of a book chosen by you, our listeners. My name is Matt Freeman, and unfortunately, I am the hero of ages.
And I'm Scott Daly, and I'm the survivor of the podcast. Does that make me evil? I don't know.
It's really hard to say with this book.
Yeah, it really is. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I hope you're all having a wonderful Saturday evening. We're doing things a little bit different this month. I'm sure we know a lot of you guys in chat already, but if you are joining us here for the very first time, hello and welcome. We are Doof Media, and we make podcasts all about the stories we love, be it books, TVs, movies, whatever. We also arrange and organize this monthly book club. Matt, explain the book club while everyone is saying hello.
Well, each month, Scott and I select 5 books from a pool submitted to us by our wonderful Doof community. We put up a poll for all of the supporters on Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia and let them vote on which they'd like us to talk about. The book with the most votes wins, and then we all read it.
That's right. And then we meet up on the last Friday of every month, usually, but the second Saturday this month because of the holidays. And we chat about the books. We pull some slides with some interesting, important moments and dive deep into this book for a couple of hours. Those of you in chat right now, feel free, make comments, talk, chat with us, ask questions. We want this to be an interactive discussion, not just the two of us talking, although, of course, there will be plenty of that because we like to talk.
Yeah, and we're the only ones with microphones.
Yeah, you guys don't. We do see Toby in the chat, Josh, Kirkistan, John. How's it going, everyone? Good to see you guys. Let's just do it.
All right.
Let's get started. Matt,
Sounds good.
What book did the patrons pick for us this month?
This month, our patrons voted to read The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. And here is the summary from Amazon. Who is the Hero of Ages? To end the final empire and restore freedom, Vin killed the Lord Ruler. But as a result, the deepness, the lethal form of the ubiquitous mists, is back, along with increasingly heavy ash falls and ever more powerful earthquakes. Humanity appears to be doomed. Having escaped death at the climax of the Well of Ascension only by becoming a Mistborn himself, Emperor Elland Venture hopes to find clues left behind by the Lord Ruler that will allow him to save the world. Vin is consumed with guilt at having been tricked into releasing the mystic force known as Ruin from the Well. Ruin wants to end the world, and its near omniscience and ability to warp reality makes stopping it seem impossible. She can't even discuss it with Elland, lest Ruin learn their plans.
Dun dun dun.
Yep.
Yeah, that is a really badass picture we have on the slideshow.
Yeah.
Toby, I really agree.
Everybody just listening on the podcast, go check out the YouTube. You can see the badass picture.
Yeah.
By
all right.
Giselle Almeida.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By Googling the Hero of Ages and then finding the picture I like the most. All right, so this is the part of the show before we really dive into it. We just like to talk about the book generally, and as we are talking about the book, we're going to open it to you guys. I see David and Sir Grau joined us as well. Hey guys, how's it going? So I'm going to ask Matt what he thought of this book, and as Matt is answering, you guys are going to tell us what you thought of this book. Had you read it before? Did you read it for the book club, or have you read this in the past? What does this one compare to you to the other 2 books in the series? Talk to us about it, and then when we finish with our stuff, we'll talk about yours. So, Matt, what did you think of The Hero of Ages?
I like this book. I place it between Mistborn and the second one,
The Well of Ascension.
So yeah, have we said out loud that this is the 3rd book in the series? If we haven't, then yeah, this is the 3rd book in Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn series.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of nitpicks about the 1st book, and then I really loved the 2nd book. And this one does fall between the 2. The reason mainly is that for me, Elland brings back everything that I was kind of not interested in regarding Kelsier, where he's just like so powerful, so powerful and so awesome. But I did like the inclusion of Tensoon. I thought Tensoon was a great character. I had a lot of fun with kind of the xenofiction aspect of that, and overall, I really did like the plot. I liked all the twists and turns and revelations of how the Kandra work and how the Kandra and how the Koloss work and all of that. That was fun and like suitably horrifying. Like I like the world building a lot in this book quite a bit. So I think we're going to be pretty positive toward this book overall. But I do have kind of, I think a lot of my nitpicks from the first book are going to get briefly rehashed here. So that was my feeling.
Cool. I think I'm with you on it lies between the second and first for me as well. I was definitely more positive about the first one than you were. And I think this book comes to a very, very satisfying conclusion. I do think that this one's overarching plot didn't suck me in as much as the other two. I feel like the first book had this very fun like heist type of plot structure they were planning, and then the second one had like there was this really complex plan with how they were gonna stop how they were going to manage to get out of this pickle they were in with the army surrounding their city. And I just felt like this one didn't pick it up from like there's a lot of mysteries going on in the story. There's mysteries around what's going on with the mists, what is Ruin doing, what is going on. But it just didn't grab me quite as much. But I think the ending of this is very satisfying as not only the ending of this novel, but the ending of this trilogy as well. I was very satisfied with how everything wrapped up, especially a lot of our characters. I think Vin and Elland are the least interesting characters in the story, and that's okay because I think the other ones really, really pick up the slack. I think Tensoon is fantastic. I like Sazed a lot. Spook as an addition to the story. I mean, we'd seen Spook before, but this is where Spook really got time to shine, and
Yeah.
I really loved those sections as well.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how in each book, like the new characters have been my favorite aspect. And I agree, Spook and Tensoon are probably my favorites, followed up by Sazed. But I think the issue is that Vin and Ellen's story basically ended at the end of the last book. Like this is a new story, and like all of the tension that was all the tension in that book in the previous book was released basically, effectively. I mean, there's still some obviously. There's still this great worldwide struggle, but like that book was very satisfying. And because it was so satisfying, we felt like, all right, well, now these characters are fine. And in fact, like this book has this weird thing where, to my mind, maybe my least favorite aspect is that they were like, yeah, I just have to be okay with my beloved going off and dying because because that's how it is. And I'm just like, I don't know about that. I don't think you would really feel that way. But
well, I mean, I think the main issue with that, and maybe we'll get into this when we really start to dive into the different parts of the book, but the whole this is a book that this is a series that starts talking about trust, and then that trust evolves into a book about faith. I made a joke in the Patreon Discord earlier this week that was basically like, hey guys, I think this Brandon Sanderson guy is a little bit religious, because this is without a doubt like the most religion focused novel in the series, and it kind of comes around to this whole story being about faith, about belief, about spirituality, about religion, kind of. And that's, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I do think Vin and Ellen's central thing was the recognition that they need to have utmost faith in each other. And you were absolutely right that was achieved at the end of the last book. And I mean, we get these satisfying moments here where Vin is like, Elland isn't going to attack, and she believes it with all her heart, and she's right, because she trusts him and they trust each other. And like, there's moments where they get to play off each other in that way. But I think I agree with you that the tension isn't there, because we know that these are two characters that have nothing but faith in each other, and they are always going to have faith in each other no matter what. That was established. That was the main driving conflict of the last book. That succeeded. So we have all these other characters where faith is being tested in different ways, right? Sazed is most explicitly. Spook's faith is being tested in like the inverse way, right? Because it's like his faith is almost being manipulated by an outside source. But those our protagonists, I guess you could argue, although I think Sazed is clearly the protagonist of this book at least. But Vin and Elland, Vin especially, is like the protagonist of the series, and yeah, she doesn't have a lot of change to do except physically,
except turning into a god.
Sure.
But I mean, but yeah, like I mean, what's funny is turning into a god doesn't really hit you very hard. But like the moment where she effectively dies and becomes the spirit, you're like, Oh, okay. Wonder where this is going.
Yeah.
Like it's not heart wrenching. It's not. I guess it's kind of awesome, but more. It's just confusing.
No, the moment that I thought Spook died got me way more than turning into Spirit God.
I mean, like this is probably. I guess I'm being a bit negative, but like I think I was more sad about the fact that Tensoon sacrificed himself fairly like um almost borderline meaninglessly than I was sad about like Ellen dying, because at least Ellen got to die heroically.
Hmm.
I don't know. I they did Tensoon dirty. It was.
I mean, he died. I mean, he didn't die heroically, but he was key to
Yeah,
everything.
he was key. Yeah, that's true. So people in the chat are saying um, they didn't reread the whole book prior to book club, but they read the last 100 pages. Yeah, that sounds
Those
fair.
are some good 100 pages. It took me a while to get into the first 400 pages of this book, and then I devoured the end.
Yeah. Kyrgyzstan says they've read this book quite a few times. Then other reread it specifically. Sirgreg actually says they like the first book, not the second, and most of the third. So,
Wow, that's the
it,
exact opposite
yeah,
of you.
yeah, I didn't dislike the first, but
Sure, sure.
I definitely love the second. Toby says they've also read it before, but not recently. John says that they like the world building, but the prose in this book is not as strong as in the Stormlight Archives. We'll have to take your word for that, and we would like to get around to talking about those books eventually.
I'm sure that's gonna happen. Yeah, it's been
Yeah.
mentioned too many times for us to not. But yeah, I mean, like, I really I spent some time like trying to pull out a specific slide of like, oh my god, look how good the writing is here, prose wise, and I couldn't. And that's like, look, I loved this book. I don't want to shit on Sanderson. That's not what I'm interested in doing here. But yeah, like there was not a moment of me where I was like, oh my god, the writing here, the word by word writing here is just blowing me away. Um,
hmm Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, Sammy says Spook snuck in as one of the favorite characters in this one.
word.
Um, yeah, yeah. A lot of good comments here. All right, yeah. You want to get on into these slides?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay.
We're gonna dive right into it.
All right. This first slide is the opening of the book. Like the previous two entries, we open on a character POV that will be very temporary. And this time it's Fatrin, leader of the tiny town of Vatitan, preparing for a Kolos invasion. I am, unfortunately, the hero of ages. 1. Fatrin squinted up at the red sun, which hid behind its perpetual screen of dark haze. Black ash fell lightly from the sky, as it did most days lately. The thick flakes fell straight, the air stagnant and hot, without even a hint of a breeze to lighten Fatrin's mood. He sighed, leaning back against the earthen bulwark, looking over Vatitan, his town. How long? He asked. Drufel scratched his nose. His face was stained with ash. He hadn't given much thought to hygiene lately. Of course, considering the stress of the last few months, Fatrin knew that he himself wasn't much to look at either. An hour, maybe, Truffle said, spitting into the dirt of the bulwark. Fatrin sighed, staring up at the falling ash. Do you think it's true, Druffle? What people are saying? What? Druffle asked. That the world is ending? Fatrin nodded. Don't know, Druffle said. Don't really care. How can you say that? Druffle shrugged, scratching himself. As soon as those Koloss arrive, I'll be dead. That's pretty much the end of the world for me. Fatrin fell silent. He didn't like to voice his doubts. He was supposed to be the strong one. When the lords had left the town, farming community, slightly more urban than the northern plantation, Fatrin had been the one who had convinced the Ska to go ahead with their planting. Fatrin had been the one to keep the press gangs away. In a time when most villages and plantations had lost every able-bodied man to one army or another, the Teton still had a working population. It had cost much of their crops to bribes, but Fatrin had kept the people safe, mostly.
So I wanted. There's a few things I wanted to talk about on this slide. I think I wanted to use this slide to talk about the chapter opening segment generally, because those were really too too small to pull a whole slide for, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But and then I wanted to talk about this thing Sanderson does with each and every one of these books, which is start off with this random character that we kind of don't see again. But what it does, I think, and what it does really well here is get us to understand the mood of the world from the perspective of people that are not main characters in it, right? Like these are none of our protagonists. They have no active role in the turn of the story, but they're just people trying to survive within this world, and we are seeing each time just how more and more they are out of control and desperate and losing. I mean, this really sets the tone, I think, for what's going on in the book.
Totally, yeah. I mean, just having this conversation be, do you think the world is ending? And things are basically so bad that they're like, I'm not going to be alive long enough to see the world end.
Right.
Yeah, definitely sets the tone of like, this is the climax. This is the third act of the whole story. So,
right. Yeah, and this poor guy is doing everything he can to keep it all safe, and the book is just gonna kind of run him over, and like he's gonna get like pulled up into the main fight. Do we ever see what happens to Fatrin specifically? I don't think so.
Yeah, let us know if anybody remembers. I don't remember specifically if Fatrin ever comes up again. It's a good question though. But yeah, I mean, all these books have begun with the ash, right? The ash falling, which I guess it's the signature of this world, and then of course at the end of it, that's completely gone forever. So
yep, it's they always start with the red sun and the falling ash, and it's of course even worse, and it will continue to get worse.
Yep.
So let's talk about. I am unfortunately the hero of ages. Let's talk about This is something also that Sanderson has done in each of these three books, which is have some sort of writing. The last two books, they've been ancient writings. This one, it is technically a future writing. It is the writing that Sazed makes as he's transforming into God. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to complain about the audiobook a little bit.
Yeah, did I tell you about that before? Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
So the audiobook reader is the same book reader for all three books, and he has a very distinctive accent for Sazed. And he uses the Sazed voice when he reads all of the preface quotes before all the chapters. So even if you didn't already know that Sazed was going to be the hero of ages, it would be the first thing you heard when you started listening to this book. So
I mean, like, that's not great. But
yeah.
I mean, I also think that doesn't matter that much, because I think, I don't know, and maybe I'm overstating it, but I think the book wants you to figure out that it's Sazed before it actually tells you it is. I think process of elimination, right? I think one of the things it's doing here, especially early in the book, is trying to make it seem like this is Vin, because everyone seems like it's Vin. Okay, yeah, we'll take a break.
Okay. Yeah, you can vamp. Yeah.
Matt has his kids today, and so we're gonna have to take breaks if they start crying. Normally, he doesn't have his kids on book club day, but we had to move it. Oh, Toby did not notice. Well, that's good. I read it, so, but I feel like people would guess, right? I mean, did any of you did you guys guess before it was revealed? Because I think you would. You read it as Sazed writing the book, not necessarily becoming the god. I guess that makes sense. But he does say I. So like he's just like Vin's transcribing for him. I mean, the guess for me was like it wants you to think it's Vin, and I'm like sitting here as I'm reading these sections, and I was like, everything I know about Vin does not say that she's going to be writing stuff like this. Like she's going to be caring about stuff like this. So okay, that's interesting. Hello, Matt.
Hello, back.
So we were talking about whether or not people were able to guess it was Sazed or not before. Some people say yes, they did. Some people aren't really sure. Sammy thought that it was Sazed, like just transcribing a book for someone else.
And see, I I remember from the prophecy in the previous book about like it was a super tall guy with things on his arms. I remember thinking that sounded like Sazed, but I don't actually remember if I had been somewhat like, you know how spoilers sometimes get in your brain and then you like don't know from that point on whether you figured things out or whether a partial spoiler, like you're basically basing things off of a partial spoiler. So I can't give myself credit for figuring it out that early, but
Sure, sure.
yeah, I definitely knew it.
I mean,
So,
and look, yes, I figured out the Sazed is Hero of Ages thing, and so, but to not give myself any credit, let me tell you the thing we're going to be talking about in the future, which is the earring. I did not figure out, and I was so mad at myself because it's so obvious, and I was like, oh, of fucking course, the earring, of course, but that did not connect in my brain at all. So, one thing obvious to me, another thing on retrospect, the book is basically screaming at you that it's the earring,
uh,
and did not connect for me at all.
yeah,
So
that's funny.
yeah, Kyrgyzstan says it's more of a fun side puzzle, not a core of the plot. Yeah, absolutely. Like it. I think 100%, 100%.
It
But
lets you have one really cool moment, but yeah.
so, what did you think about the how this is structured though? Because he uses this like he has in the past. Sanderson does to kind of really give us more information about the world, about what's going on. A lot of times, what's in these uh, sections, um, like clue you in on what's going to go on in the chapter itself. But sometimes I feel like they spoil stuff, and spoil is weird because obviously you're reading the book, so it can't spoil. But like the way the preview sections talked about preservation and ruin before the book really started dealing with preservation and ruin as concepts was just a little weird to me.
Yeah, it's not my favorite choice. Um, like in some cases, he's telling you something where you get a little bit more out of the chapter that's about to happen if you know that. Like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the Kolos stuff, he'll kind of explain about the um, Himalurgy. And he'll explain about the Kolos, and then you read that, and then you're like, okay, I get it. I
Yeah,
understand.
yeah,
And if I had just read the chapter, then I'd kind of be like watching the characters dumbly puzzle their way through something where like in reality it is actually more efficient for us to just tell it, just
yeah,
just
yeah.
just say it. Like I think my problem with this whole book actually relative to the other two is that this is the one where he was like, well, I got to work in these 83 different awesome world building ideas that I had and show how clever I've been for this whole series by incorporating these ideas in fun and interesting ways. So I need to just make sure I get all of that in. So I'm going to cram some of that into the little pre-chapter blurbs and
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, you're absolutely right. There's a lot in this book. I really noticed that as I was trying to pull slides. There's a lot of ideas here, a lot of them, and they're all good ideas. But it's crowded.
yeah, yeah. Not my favorite choice in this particular one. So
All right, let's move on to the next section and talk about our boy Sazed.
okay,
Sazed, chief ambassador of the new empire, studied a sheet of paper in front of him. The tenets of the Kansi people, it read, on the beauty of morality, the importance of death, and the vital function of the human body as a partaker in the divine whole. The words were written in his own hand, copied out on one of his chemical minds, where he had storages containing literally thousands of books. Beneath the heading, filling most of the sheet in cramped writing, he had listened to the basic beliefs of the Kanzi and their religion. Sazed settled back in his chair, holding up the paper and going over his notes one more time. He'd been focusing on this religion for a good day now, and he wanted to make a decision about it. Even before the day's studies, he'd known much about the Kanzi faith, for he'd studied it along with all of the other pre-ascension religions for most of his life. Those religions had been his passion, the focus of his research. And then the day had come where he'd realized that all of his learning had been meaningless. The Kanzi religion contradicts itself, he decided, making a notation with his pen at the side of the paper. It explains that all creatures are part of the divine whole, and implies that each body is a work of art created by a spirit who decides to live in this world. However, one of its other tenets is that the evil are punished with bodies that do not function correctly. A distasteful doctrine, in Sazed's mind. Those who are born with mental or physical deficiencies deserve compassion, perhaps pity, but not disdain. Besides, which of the religion's ideals were true? that spirits chose and designed their bodies as they wished, or that they were punished by the body chosen for them? And what are the influence of lineage upon a child's features and temperament? He nodded to himself, made a note at the bottom of the sheet of paper. Logically inconsistent, obviously untrue. So this is really the main idea of Sazed's arc through this book in particular. Is he was religion guy, he was faith guy. The woman he loves dies at the end of the last book. He also not just that the woman he loves, it's that he realizes that the religion, that the core tenet of his life was his religion, and that was proven to be in his mind faked, made up to manipulate people into releasing ruin. So he's abandoned religion.
Yeah. So this whole book is his angry atheist phase.
Exactly. And I mean, one of the things that I appreciate what Sanderson does here as a religious person is actually confront the idea of challenging your faith, right? Because
yeah,
I mean, I think there is absolutely, and you know, I grew up Catholic, and I went through moments of serious doubt where I was challenging my faith. But I was talking in Discord about Martin Scorsese because like half his movies are a guilty Catholic challenging and trying to understand their faith, and you're really just like trying to wrestle with this idea that seems inherently contradictory to yourself. And I think there's an honesty to that in what Sazed's going through here.
Yeah, like, I mean, absolutely, it rings very true.
Yeah.
It's I mean, very clearly, and like you said, honestly, right? He's not pulling his punches. He wants to show this character going through the exact kind of struggles and doubts that any religious person who is having doubts would feel, and it goes all the way to the point of him basically rejecting everything. Yeah. He's kind of, you know, his journey, I don't know if we're going to hit it more than this one time, but his journey over the course of the book is he's going through each of the religions in his metal minds and finding flaw with each and every one of them, and basically realizing once he's done that, like, okay, well, what does that really mean? And I mean, frankly, for me, it was his reversal at the end where it's like, okay, but the reason you had a reversal at the end is that literally supernatural things happened and you turned into God. So that's not something that like every person reading this book has access to. So,
well, sure. However, I think one of the things this book does very nicely is construct an argument for what spirituality or religion are to a lot of people, which is beyond a thing in which a thing that has every single answer to every single question, a thing that is logically infallible and completely stands up to scrutiny. No, it's a feeling, it's belief. Like the concept of faith is supposed to be, I just feel like something is watching out for me. I just feel like something's out there, and I'm going to trust in that and hope that everything is okay in the end. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's kind of, I think that's Sanderson's thesis, right? Is that like at the end of the day, no, we're never going to get physical proof. We're not going to turn into gods, but you gotta live your life according to him with this faith, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's like one of the things I like is the method in which he is doing this is always going to not work, right? Because these religions were created by people, and people are inconsistent. And like every one of these religions is going to be inconsistent and have fallacies within it, because they're crafted and written, recorded by human beings who are illogical and inconsistent, and the idea that any one of these religions is going to be the truth, right? Like he's looking for the truth, he's looking for the answers, he's looking for a reason, and you have to find that outside of the logic, the rules of the religion, I think. Mm-hmm. Is what the book is saying. And I don't know, I like that. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I mean, I it doesn't quite hang solidly for me. Like, who said this in the chat? Sorry, that everyone's participating a lot, which is great, but the problem is then things get lost. um, sorry. Basically, yeah, Sammy says all the religions fell short, so Sazed just made his own. And I think Sammy's being a little bit tongue in cheek there, but to me, I'm like, I don't see how you could do anything other than that based on kind of the way this book frames it, because he's basically saying like, yeah, of course all religions are wrong. You just got to kind of have some kind of faith that that the good things will happen if you believe in good things happening. And I'm
But
like,
I think what the book says is all the religions are the same. Like they have different, like one of the things the book specifically says is when he gets to the true religion, which is his religion, right?
mhm,
It's like, wait a minute, all the stuff in here, I've seen this in all the other religions. This is all here. And
mhm,
so like they're all, to me, it's saying they're part of this one core ideology, this one core belief, um, that has expanded out to all these other religions. And I mean, the at the end of the book, the power of religion is specific to being the thing in which the returning the planet to the way it was recorded via the ways in which the different religions believed
mhm.
in different things, or placed importance in different part of existence and part of. So I don't know.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I don't think he created his own. I think he's just like put them all
It's,
together to
yeah,
make the one religion, which of course everyone knows is Mormonism.
it's Mormonism,
Um,
right? Yeah. No, I mean, just to, I don't know. I don't think we're going to resolve this. I guess like the thing that I think my sticking point, my actual sticking point is, yes, you're right about everything you just said. That all makes sense and it's logically coherent and it's actually kind of cool and I kind of like it. But that said, like stuff like the individual doctrines of the religions that were obviously false, like people are punished by being put into ugly bodies or whatever, like that's obviously false. And so the point is like if all these religions were true in some like holistic way, but they also contained false and harmful doctrines. So this doesn't help any particular person struggling with their faith, because usually when you're struggling with your faith, you're not just struggling with vague vague questions, you're struggling with the 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 implication that you should follow some particular doctrine. And basically this doesn't make any case that you should follow these doctrines because it admits that the doctrines are silly. So
yeah,
it,
man.
it, I mean not like I expect this fantasy book to have solved the problem of like justifying religious faith, which has never actually been like solved in any solid way, but I'm just, you know, pointing it out.
Yeah, I think John points it out. They weren't true, but they all had truth in them. Um,
Yeah, yeah. But they also had falsehood in them. So
well, sure, but everything
yeah,
does. I don't know.
that's true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're going in circles, but
we are. Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I think everybody's basically agreeing that you laid it out pretty perfectly with
mhm.
what you just said. So
I like
um,
Kirkstand says like spokes on the wheel, and I like that expression for that a lot. Yeah.
yeah, cool. All right, next slide. This is a new point of view character for this book. It's the young Spook. Elland has left him in Urto, a town that has been taken over by the cruel first citizen, and Spook has special powers. He'd always been told not to flare his tin too much. He'd been warned not to become too dependent upon it. It would do dangerous things to his body, people said. And the truth was they were right. He had flared his tin nonstop for a year straight, never letting up, keeping his body in a constant state of super heightened senses. And it had changed him. He worried that the changes would indeed be dangerous. But he needed them, for the people of Urto needed him. Stars blazed in the sky above him like a million tiny suns. They shone through the mists, which had, during the last year, become diaphanous and weak. At first, Spook had thought the world itself was changing. Then he had realized that it was just his perception. Somehow, by flaring tin for so long, he had permanently enhanced his senses to a point far beyond what other Alamancers could attain. He'd almost stopped. The flared tin had begun as a reaction to Clubs' death. He still felt terrible about the way he'd escaped Luthadel, leaving his uncle to die. During those first few weeks, Spook had flared his metals almost as a penance. He'd wanted to feel everything around him, take it all in, even though it was painful. Perhaps because it was painful. But then he'd started to change, and that had worried him. But the crew always talked about how hard Vin pushed herself. She rarely slept, using pewter to keep herself awake and alert. Spook didn't know how that worked. He was no Mistborn and could only burn one metal. But he figured that if burning this one metal could give him an advantage, he'd better take it, because they were going to need every advantage they could get. The starlight was like daylight to him. During the actual day, he had to wear a cloth tied around his eyes to protect them, and even then going outside was sometimes blinding. His skin had become so sensitive that each pebble on the ground, each crack, each flake of stone, felt like a knife jabbing him through the soles of his shoes.
Let's talk about my boy Spook.
It's a fun idea. It's a fun concept for a character that he walks around with this blindfold around his eyes, but he can see just fine, and it's great.
Yeah, I mean it serves so many purposes, right? I mean, we have this really, I think, arguably one of the most complex characters in the story is this kid who like desperately wants to be important. He's got survivor's guilt. He feels powerless and useless, and then is suddenly thrust in this position of importance. And he's kind of manipulated into this position by Ruin, but it's like playing off his desperation. And then we bring this like otherworldly nature to it with the tin flaring. And I think this is one place where Sazed's summaries really improved the text, didn't take anything away from it, because like it explained what was going on here in one of those, right? Like this idea, I forget what they called them, but just the people that flared their metals for too long, and it's a really fun idea.
Just overall, I think taking Spook and making him a main character was really cool, because he was this guy who couldn't even like speak normally. He was a kid. And then you get into his head and you realize that he has kind of a complex about it. Like nobody takes him seriously. He knows nobody takes him seriously. He's not wrong about that. That they do see him as a kid.
Yeah.
He is a tin eye, which is like, frankly, probably the most useless. I don't know. Maybe being like one of those ones who can make a haze, a copper cloud is the most useless actually. But
no, the most useless one is the one that.
Oh yeah, Duralumin.
Yeah. That would be. I'm a misting. Aw.
Oh yeah, I can burn my metal really fast. I can make Duralumin disappear really fast.
Aw. Yeah.
No, but I mean, I guess it's not that useless, but it's much less useful than being able to fight or being a badass Mistborn, or at least he feels that way, and it's dramatized sufficiently, right? Yeah. So then putting this guy who is kind of weak, but maybe not as weak as he seems. And then making him important, and furthermore, not just making him important, but making it so that somebody's kind of preying on his sense of needing to be important, and manipulating that. That was great. I love that.
Well, and I love how it is playing off of this theme of faith, right? This faith and trust, because what Ruin is doing is basically taking, and what Ruin does a lot is basically taking the concept of people believing in Kelsier, believing in this legend, the Church of the Survivor, and using that to manipulate people. So it's this really, and I don't know if the book ever really like comes to terms with the fact that Ruin's success is built on the manipulating of people's belief in Kelsier. But it is a really interesting angle, right? That like he wants so bad to live up to Kelsier's legacy that he's tricked into doing all this terrible stuff.
Yeah, right. I mean, we've also got the whole element where all of the obligators, like this one, the one kind of more prominent obligator toward the latter half of the book, is this very kind of like serious-minded and philosophy-minded guy who really earnestly believes in the Lord Ruler, like as a god, like he's thought it through. He's just very serious about it. Like you kind of feel for him. You're like, wow, the Lord Ruler really did a number on you. And so like that's an example. The book is fun in its ambiguity about faith not being this purely good thing. I mean, Spook's faith is used against him. The obligator is clearly just wrong about the Lord Ruler being, the creator of the universe. Although I guess he's right that he basically reshaped the world. But um,
and
it's yeah.
and he's kind of a good dude. That's the I think that one of the greatest things that this book looks at. I mean, he's not good, but uh, he's not terrible either,
The
right?
obligator, you mean? Yeah, I mean
No,
he
no, I mean
seems.
I meant the Lord Ruler.
Oh, so I was gonna say the obligator is like the best leader out of anyone we've encountered in this whole
Yeah,
series.
yeah.
The
That's
Lord
actually the next
Ruler.
slide. So we want to
Okay.
just move to that. We can talk about
Yeah,
that.
I guess I was just gonna say like the book does a really fascinating 180 on the Lord Ruler.
Yes, it does.
It's
Yeah,
because like everything up until this book has been like, this guy's horrible. He murdered his friend and tortures everyone for 1,000 years. And oh no, actually, he was a super good guy and he just made some mistakes.
yeah. This is a swell guy. So yeah, this is the part of the book. Vin and Elland are looking for the caches that the Lord Ruler has hidden around the Final Empire. The last one is in Fadrex, a city currently run by Yeoman, the obligator that Matt was just talking about. They got to find a way to get inside, and Vin has snuck in to talk to a little spy on the inside, and they have a very interesting conversation about this guy. I need to know about Yeoman, the obligator king. He's a good man. Vin frowned. Oh, Slow Swift said. You didn't expect that. Everyone who is your enemy must also be an evil person? No, Vin said, thinking back to the days before the fall of the Final Empire. I ended up marrying someone my friends would have named an enemy. Ah, well then, Yeoman is a fine man and a decent king. A fair bit better king than Set ever was, I'd say. My old friend tries too hard, and that makes him brutal. He doesn't have the subtle touch that a leader needs. What has Yeoman done that is so good, then? Vin asked. He kept the city from falling apart, Slow Swift said, puffing his pipe. The smoke mixed with the swirling mists. Plus, he gave us both nobility and Ska what they wanted. Which was? Stability, child. For a time, the world was in turmoil. Neither Ska nor nobleman knew his place. Society was collapsing, and people were starving. Set did little to stop that. He fought constantly to keep what he'd obtained. Then Yeoman stepped in. People saw authority in him. Before the collapse, the Lord Ruler's ministry had ruled, and the people were ready to accept an obligator as a leader. Yeoman immediately took control of the plantations and brought food to his people. Then he returned the factories to operation, started work in the Fadrex mines again, and gave the nobility a semblance of normalcy. Vin sat quietly. Before, it might have seemed incredible to hear that. After 1,000 years of oppression, the people would be willing to return to slavery. Yet, something similar had happened in Luthadel. They had ousted Elland, who had granted them freedoms, and had put Penrod in charge, all because he promised them to return to what they had lost. So we talked about this last book as well, this concept of people returning to slavery, basically out of fear and chaos, and we're doing it again here. We're doing this, as you said, probably one of the best leaders in the book, because he's returning them to a state of normalcy, and everyone likes it.
Yeah, and when we actually get to meet him, he actually seems like a thoughtful person. It's pretty convincing. In the chat, Toby says, so yeah, so Anas says one criticism you hear about the book a lot is how Ruin is too one-dimensionally evil, but they feel like the book makes up for that by revealing how the Lord Ruler wasn't actually like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some interesting back and forth about that.
Yeah, I mean, I like this. Everyone who is your enemy must also be an evil person. And I think they're talking about the Lord Ruler as well. And I mean, what this is again, I think, a very kind of religious take on this idea of good and evil, right? I mean, we literally have this world in which ruin and preservation are two sides of the same coin, could be represented as good and evil in the world, and the Lord Ruler is this guy who maybe at once upon a time meant well, but was slowly over the course of this 1,000 years corrupted by ruin. And so like the idea that the book is kind of trying to explore here is the idea that evil is not inherently a human trait, but is fostered upon humanity via the influence of this ruin, this god.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean that's very interesting because if you look at it, every person that's standing in the way of any of our protagonists here are doing it because they're being manipulated and influenced by ruin.
Yeah, That's interesting. I don't know if I can quite tease that out completely because it seems like some of the destruction that the Lord Ruler caused was actually just honest mistakes, which were not even caused by Ruin. They were just, well, I guess you could argue they were caused by Ruin because Ruin kind of forced him into a situation where he had to use the power without knowing really what he was doing. I don't know. It's interesting to think about. Yeah. I like this Slow Swift character. He's a fairly minor character actually, but he's just
Yeah.
like this old man who enjoys being an informant and smoking his pipe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me. Like, I mean, you break down which characters, like, which are the bad characters, right?
Yeah.
And every one of them is being influenced in some way.
hmm I mean, really, I'm trying to think like the worst, the worst bad guy other than Ruin, like the worst human, I would say is probably the first citizen. And then even him, we realize he's been manipulated as well.
Right. Like that. I
So
mean,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I think you're right. I think like I think at least Set was just a piece of garbage. Like I don't think he had like a steel spike or anything like that. I mean, even Zane had a steel spike driving him crazy.
Yeah. I guess the
Um,
counter to this is that Ellen's father did not have a steel spike,
yeah,
presumably, in him.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. Okay.
but I don't know. I do think it's interesting that the book is kind of dealing with this idea of, like, we thought the Lord Ruler was this inherently evil person, and I don't even think that the book is like saying, "Oh, it was a mistake to kill that guy." I don't think that's what it's saying at all, because at 1,000 years later, um, he was manipulated, and manipulated or no, he was an evil person
Uh-huh.
that was doing evil thing. So needed to be stopped, and it
Yeah.
eventually brought about the rebirth of the world, blah blah blah. But I do think it's saying we need to look at human beings as more than just, you're bad because you're on the other side of me.
Yeah.
And I
Right.
think that's what this section is doing, and I think that's what a lot of the book is doing, as
Yeah.
we learn more about those people and what has been going on with them.
Yeah. I think that's one cool thing about Vin's characterization is very consistent throughout the whole series. Like at no point, like even in this book where it doesn't spend a huge amount of time with her relative to the other books, it's very consistent in her kind of black and white thinking. Like that is her, right?
Mm-hmm.
She is this way,
Sure,
absolutely.
sure.
And I think maybe she matures a bit over the course of this book, but it's kind of endearing almost that she still managed to have this personality trait up to this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
All right, next slide. So after saving Vin and revealing the secret of the Kandra, Tinsoon returns home to await the judgment of his people. Tinsoon of the third generation, Kanpar said loudly, are you ready to bear the sentence of your judgment? There will be no judgment, Tinsoon said, his words slurred, coming from the dog's mouth, but they were clear enough to understand. No judgment? Kanpar asked, amused. You now seek to back out of what you yourself demanded? I came to give information, not to be judged. I'm not speaking to you, Kanpar, Tinsoon said, turning from the second to look up. I'm talking to them. They hear your words, third, Kanpar snapped. Control yourself. I will not let you turn this judgment into a circus as you did before. Tinsoon smiled. Only a Kandra would consider a mild argument a circus. Tinsoon didn't turn away from the first generation, however. Now, Kanpar said, You, Tinsoon bellowed, causing Kanpar to sputter again. First generation! How long will you sit in your comfortable home pretending that the world above you doesn't exist? You think that if you ignore the problems, they won't affect you? Or is it that you've stopped believing in your own teachings? The day of the mists have come. The endless ash now falls. The earth shakes and trembles. You can condemn me, but you must not ignore me. The world will soon die. If you want people, in all their forms, to survive, you must act. You must be ready. For you may soon need to command our people to accept the resolution. The room fell silent. Several of the shadows above shuffled, as if discomfited, though Kandra generally didn't react in such a way. It was too disorderly. Then a voice, soft, scratchy, and very tired, spoke from above. Proceed, Kanpar. I love all the Kandra stuff. It's my favorite.
Yeah, so I wanted to use this to talk about the Kandra generally, and
Yeah.
also this is basically like Greta Thunberg like, yelling at the UN. This is basically what's happening. Like, you fools!
Yeah. Condemn her. Yeah. Yeah. Like I love. I mean, it takes us a while before we figure out what's actually going on with them, but it's fun because you can even think back to the last book where you didn't ever really get to understand why Tensoon had so much resentment toward Vin. And eventually she wins him over by being awesome, but we get so much clarity on that here, where it's like he resents humans because he's had his whole life locked in this terrible, unfair kind of servitude where,
Right.
like, if where like he sort of is like a weird form of human actually. It's like a human who was turned into a monster who was turned back into a human, sort of. Like that's kind of what a Kandra is, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, I mean, I love their system. I mean, like we learn so much about them. We learn the first generation is the buddies of our Lord Ruler friend.
Yeah.
That he was so afraid of overthrowing him, I guess, that he turned into Mistrace and said, no, it's okay. I'll give you consciousness, kind of.
Yeah.
It's just a really fascinating system that is designed here, and then like they're loyal to preservation, because we have three different types of people here, right? And two of them are loyal to ruin. One of them is loyal to preservation, kind of. So we see they can get possibly taken over at the end. I really like this as a method of kind of exploring the exposition of the world using these creatures, and it's really fascinating. And like, I don't think I've hated a character as much as I've hated Kanpar in the moments at the end where, like, as he's finally talked to the first generation and everything's good, and then Kanpar's like, no, this is a coup. I'm like, you son of a bitch, what have you done?
Yeah, seriously, I agree with you. That is one thing that Sanderson definitely was able to push my buttons with this jerk.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're right. It was fun to have this, to have the first generation around to kind of give you a real sense of resolution at the end, where they're like, yeah, we've been around the whole time, literally since the beginning, and it felt like a suitably big deal when they order the resolution,
Right.
which is being hinted at here, but we don't find out what that is so much later.
It's basically like preservation made like a Kool-Aid cult.
Uh-huh.
And everyone had to drink the Kool-Aid.
Yeah,
I don't know how I feel
terrible.
about that.
It's terrible. I mean, yeah.
I do like the idea of like just this general idea of like you were created and your purpose is coming to be fulfilled, but everyone is terrified of it, right? Like even the first generation, the people that were around when this pact was made, are just like, I mean, it's obviously happening. Like that's what I love about the speech. It's like, look outside. Like shit's popping off. It's time. If there was ever a time, it was right now. And the elder generations are just like, I don't know if I want to deal with this right now.
Right. I mean, it's a raw deal for them because it's like, oh, we're immortal. We get to live forever in our peaceful home until the end of the world, which, like, it's not like the Lord Ruler even lied to them and was like, and then you get to go to heaven.
Right.
And he was just like, yeah, and then I'm going to need you all to kill yourselves at a certain point.
Please kill yourself. It will be necessary to allow existence to go on. Thank
you. And by existence, I mean existence for the humans who you hate.
Yeah. You're definitely all going to die.
Yeah, right.
Thanks.
And then they do it.
You got to turn into cool puppy dogs.
Yeah. They do it though. Ultimately,
They do. That's our buddy Tensoon just goes out like a champ. You said it wasn't a heroic death. I mean, he kills himself to save the others.
That's true. I guess it was more like I was I wasn't saying that it was a bad death. I was just saying I was more sad about that than I was about like Elland or
Sure,
whatever else.
sure, sure.
It was tragic in a kind of like it wasn't awesome. It was sad.
Man, Ellen getting his head chopped off. Like I had to reread that because I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
That was really shocking. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't like, I wasn't super bummed, but it was definitely shocking.
I definitely accepted he was going to die, but cutting off your hero's head is particularly brutal
Sure, sure.
and unusual. Yeah, I mean there was some good back and forth in the chat, by the way, about this idea that like preservation and ruin shouldn't necessarily be mapped onto good and evil because wanting things to always be exactly the same is also not good.
Sure, sure.
And that's why like you can read into the fact that preservation kind of wanted this to happen. So I don't know.
Yeah, I
I just
mean,
thought that was
one of
yeah.
the most interesting things about this whole thing is that like preservation made this deal, right?
Mhm.
Like, hey, I need your help to create these humans. Okay, fair. I'll help you, but you have to help me blow it up at the end of this.
Mhm.
And preservation just like, yeah, okay. And then later is like, psych.
Yeah. Right. I've tricked you. I, the good deity, have tricked you.
Yeah, I mean, and that's like putting, and I think the pushback to calling ruin evil is fair because ruin is not evil. Ruin is just doing what ruin is supposed to do.
Uh-huh.
Like
Yeah.
it exists to destroy. That's what it's
Right.
for.
Yeah.
And I mean, we see like at the very end, we see like a human body fall out, right? And like there's an
Uh-huh.
implication there that at some point, like some human being was pulled into this whole thing, right? Because the same that happens with Vin with preservation is there's an energy, but there's a person in there somewhere that has to like
Yeah.
control the
Uh,
energy.
Both preservation and ruin, I think,
Right.
left bodies, which are probably in the Stormlight archive or something. I don't know, but um, yeah. I think that. I mean, I think this cut. Honestly, like, not no spoils, but like I'm aware that Sanderson's works all are in like the shared universe, the Cosmere. So, kind of expecting there to be some shenanigans that extend well beyond this book.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think that's
Um,
fair. Um,
yeah.
but the good thing is it doesn't like it'll be a nice like Easter egg, like oh, but I don't think it's like it's obviously not key to your
It's not going to
enjoyment of
change.
this, right?
Yeah, it's not going to change this book.
Right, right, right.
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Uh,
All right. Let's talk about the new magic system in this book. So Vin, by talking to her favorite Kolos buddy, Human, Vin discovers the third magic system of this trilogy, Himalurgy. Is that how you pronounce it? Himalurgy?
sure. Yeah, Himalurgy. Yeah.
A third art, Ham said, looking up. A third way to use metals. There is allomancy, which draws power from the metal itself. There is for how do you pronounce that? I always say it wrong.
Ferrochemy.
Ferrochemy. I don't know why that word like it just frustrates me. Which uses metals to draw power from your own body. And there is Marsh called it hemalurgy. Vin said quietly. Hemalurgy, Ham said, which uses the metals to draw power from someone else's body. Great, Seth said. Point. The Lord Ruler created servants to help him, Elland said. Using this art, this hemalurgy, he made soldiers, which we call Kolos. He made spies, which we call Kandra. And he made priests, which we call inquisitors. He built them all with weaknesses so that he could control them. I first learned how to take control of the Kolos because of Tensoon, Vin said. He inadvertently showed me the secret. He mentioned that the Kandra and Kolos were cousins, and I realized I could control one just as I had the other. I still don't see where you're heading with this, Demo said, glancing from Vin to Elland. The Inquisitors must have the same weakness, Demo. This hemalurgy leaves the mind wounded. It allowed an Allomancer to creep in and take control. The nobility always wondered what made the Inquisitors so fanatically devoted to the Lord Ruler. They weren't like regular obligators. They were far more obedient, zealous to a fault. So I just wanted to use this. This is where hemalurgy is like actually brought up in the context of the novel and not the outside beginning chapter parts. So I just wanted to talk about this with you a little bit. And what an interesting wrinkle on the universe this is.
Yeah. Um, it's consistent with sort of the theology or whatever that
Hmm.
that like the preservation powers are ones that give you power, but the ruin powers are ones that only really take power
Yeah.
from others. And but like it's also kind of cool because it's like um I don't know. I really like his world building here because basically the idea of hemalurgy is you can make a sort of impossibly powerful person like what they do to Marsh, where
Hmm.
Marsh just has this ridiculous number of spikes and he's just, off the charts in terms of any other any other combatant we've seen in the story. And it all makes sense within the framework of like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like he's stolen powers from a ton of other people, and that does seem like a super evil thing to do, and
Yeah.
it would go hand in hand with Ruin and what Ruin would be interested in. So
Yeah, I mean the,
yeah,
the concept of destroying one person to make another person powerful. Like I think they said Inquisitors are 5 or more people. Kolos are like 5 souls, right? I think. Um,
I don't remember if it was 5 or 3 or what exactly.
it was
But
numbers.
yeah, it
16.
was.
It was probably 16. That's
It's
an important number.
prime numbers or some, yeah. But wasn't yeah, wasn't was Marsh 16 or was he 12?
Marsh was a lot. Marsh had more than like anyone, right?
Marsh had more than
I
anyone. I
don't
just don't
remember how
remember how
many it
many it
was.
was. Yeah,
It might have been 16. I don't know. No, because 16 feels like preservation's
I
number.
think you're right. I think it is preservation's number. I
Yeah.
think it was probably 12.
Yeah. Um, but I mean, and then we take this idea and then we use it in such fun ways. We've already talked about the earring, and we'll deal with that explicitly when we get to it, so I can feel bad about myself for missing it. But I mean, the way that it's set up with Spook, right, um, is so fascinating because they don't tell you until much, much, much later. But like, Spook gets stabbed, and then he's got pewter all of a sudden, and we're like,
Yeah,
oh wow, that's cool. And like,
yeah.
and you're like, oh, cool. He's good. Like, and you're like, okay, is this really Kelsier? What's going on here? And then like, I think maybe there's a chapter heading about Himalurgy, and then you're like, oh no.
And I thought that was a good trick too because the pre-chapter text says something about like the people who burned too much tin, their final form was very unique. And then the next chapter after that, he's seeing dead Kelsier,
Hmm.
and you're like, oh, I get it. The power that you get after you use too much tin is you get to see the dead.
Yeah,
That's so cool. No, that's a misdirect. So
yeah,
which is even better. So he gets the piece of metal in his body, and then I guess you kind of assume that Kelsier has magically given him um, pewter pewter bending.
yeah, sure. Pewter bending. Yeah, I mean, it's so clever because it's right there in front of your face, right? Like he's fighting a thug when it happens. We know he's fighting a pewter burner when it happens. We know the sword goes through the one guy and into him, and breaks off. Then there's a scene where Kelsier, like, he goes to rip out the piece, and Kelsier's like, "No, leave it in as a sense of pride of what you've accomplished."
Yeah, okay.
And
Just
you're
leave
just,
this
yeah,
piece of steel in my
sure.
body. That's
Right,
fine. Yeah.
right. But and then so it's one of those things that I feel like, and I don't know about any of this, I feel like a lot of times Sanderson wants you to figure it out before the book tells you. Like, I think, and someone way earlier in the chat said they felt sometimes Sanderson doesn't trust you to get it. And maybe that's it. Maybe that's a symptom of him, like, not having a lot of trust in your ability to connect the dots, that he kind of has to beat you with it until you get it before actually doing the full reveal. um but he does, like, this particular, like, he really just beats it over your head, like, even before you get to the
Yeah.
moment, which I think I pulled the slide of the moment where he realizes it, so we're gonna get there. But I don't know,
Well,
it just like,
for me, um, pretty soon after he starts hearing Kelsier is like, kill him, and you're like, oh, it's ruined. Like, because that's
touche,
exactly what
touche.
he would do to
To Zane.
Zane.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
to
that
Billy
that to
Zane.
me, I was like, oh, well, oh no,
Yeah, but
and yeah,
to in defense of Ghost Kelsier, the that guy was real bad. He's real
it's
bad.
true. It's true. But then it started to be for less and less bad people.
Yeah.
So
Well, when I first put it together, I was like, well, wait a minute. Why does Ruin want to help them take over the city? Doesn't that seem against its plans? And then we get to the part where the city's on fire, and I'm like, I got it.
yeah,
Got it.
right. There was such for so much of it for me. There was this pall of doom hanging over it because you're like, oh, I really this is going to be so bad
Yeah.
because like this kid is he thinks he's working for the side of good and he's being manipulated and he's going to result in all these people dying and it's going to be his fault for being manipulated and then he's going to be sad.
I
But
know. Like, I think I texted you when I was like halfway through the book, where I was like, it is really devastating watching Spook head down this path of
yeah,
horribleness because I figured it out ahead of time and I knew this is where it was going, and I was like, oh man, this is really bumming me out.
yeah, yeah, me too.
That's
So yeah,
interesting, John. Do you see what John just said here?
there's a
There's
lot of places where he describes something and you understand what he's saying just by how he describes it.
and then he immediately summarizes what you're supposed to feel. Yeah, I couldn't pull one of those out. I don't remember specifically feeling that, but you saying that, I'm like, okay, I agree with that.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's that. Next slide. While attempting to find the hidden cache, Vin is captured by Yeoman's men. While in captivity, Ruin appears. Her heart began to beat quickly, and for the first time this evening, imprisonment included, she began to feel afraid. The pulses felt just like the ones she'd felt a year ago, the pulses that had led her to the Well of Ascension. Why have you come here? She whispered to the blackness. Laughter. It rang in the empty cavern, loud, free. The thumpings approached, though no footsteps marked the thing's movement. The pulses suddenly grew enormous and overpowering. They washed across Vin, unpounded by the cavern's echoes, and the unreal sound that passed through things both living and dead. She stepped backward in the darkness and nearly tripped over the shelves she'd knocked down. I should have known you wouldn't be fooled, a kindly voice said in her head. The thing's voice. She'd heard it only once before, a year ago, when she'd released it from its imprisonment in the Well of Ascension. What do you want? You know what I want. You've always known. And she did. She had sensed it in the moment when she had touched the thing. Ruin, she called it. It had very simple desires, to see the world come to its end. I will stop you, she said. Yet it was hard not to feel foolish speaking the words to a force she did not understand, a thing that existed beyond men and beyond worlds.
So let's talk about Ruin.
Okay.
So I don't know if I like this reveal that the Reen we heard talking to her throughout basically the entire book was just a literal force. You know, the literalization of like the influence of a previous part of your life over you,
Satan.
like is like I just don't find that interesting. But like I didn't. It's not even that I don't like it. It's just I liked it better when it was just this is the power of the past on me versus here's the literal representation of evil trying to influence me.
I guess you could say it ceases to be a character trait and becomes a plot point.
Yes,
Um,
that is a much better way of describing what I
guess
was.
I guess I'm in the same place as you, where I guess I didn't dislike it, but I see your point entirely. Where it feels mildly like it takes something away from who Vin is, that she doesn't actually have the nagging voice of her brother in her head. She has literally a demon trying to drive her off the good path of trusting people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it is very it is very religious, though, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think this was my favorite part of the Vin story. Actually, was her being captive and trying to manipulate, I guess, the obligator once she gets out of the cell and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
I definitely like that more than like I don't know. I think probably when I was younger I would have loved all of the Mistborn shooting coins and stuff. At this point, I just love the intrigue and the conflicts and stuff like that.
Yeah, people in chat are saying that it was more of a combination, that there are moments in which it is really just her thinking about what Reen said versus moments of it's literally just Ruin. But yeah, I agree with that. I think the book kind of goes out of its way to make that clear. I think she says it definitely wasn't all Ruin, right?
She does, but okay, sure. I mean, yeah, you're right that the text does say that, but I think it leaves you feeling like, well, when was it Reen? And thus I can't be sure, and thus I'll just assume it was Ruin.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And Kyrgyzstan is connecting it to superpowers in Worm. Yeah, but that's like, I feel like in Worm it's actual metaphor. In this it's literal. Like, I don't think Ruin is like a metaphor for any character trait. I think Ruin's just the embodiment of badness or destruction or life.
Yeah, it's interesting. I now have, it's now a pattern with me where I'm just never happy with representations of ultimate evil in fantasy novels. I'm just like, that's not how evil works. And it's just not interesting to me if you're going to try to do ultimate evil and then make it just like kind of a voice that laughs and sneers. It's like, well, that's a Saturday morning cartoon villain. That's not ultimate evil.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's effective. That I like to attack you from your weakest angle, which for Vin was Reen.
True.
Is certainly interesting and clever. Like, I liked that, but I don't know. Why I'm like, the weird thing is I feel like I'm looking things to complain about because I like this book so much.
Yeah. Well, I actually liked the parts where Ruin was like one thing that felt nice to me was that there's a moment where Ruin is like gloating, and I was feeling like, along with Vin, I was like, oh man, this is horrible. Like we're in such dire straits. And then there's like a moment, and I feel like I like got it at the same time Vin did, which is fun. Like not because she was thinking it, but because I like realized it sort of as I was reading. I was like, oh, like the only reason he would be gloating would be to make her feel hopeless and thus not try, implying that there is hope if she were to try.
Right.
And that's the conclusion she comes to, and then good things happen. So yeah.
I mean, no, Ruin is not ultimate evil in the literal sense, but in the sense of to the human beings living on the planet. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking of the first in Buffy, Josh. I was trying to come up with a way of saying that without spoiling Buffy, but yeah, that's what I think the first is spot on.
Josh points out that there are great moments like her taking off the earring and in the first book and putting it back on, and as soon as she puts it back on, we hear Reen speaking to her. So like it's consistent across all the books, of course, which I would expect it to be.
Yeah.
The element of the earring was very prominent even in the first book.
It's very clear that at least in these large movements, he had all these ideas from the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. All right, now we're gonna talk. Here's what I tried to pull for a part that I thought was pretty well written. This is Elland, desperate and frustrated, just going off to try to take over like 30,000 Koloss, and then just use it to relieve some tension. Weapon met weapon in the blazing village, metal ringing like a forge under the hammer, and Elland stood his ground, matching strength with a monster twice his height. The Koloss stood, dumbfounded. Stronger than I should be, Elland thought, twisting and cutting the surprised creature's arm free. Why can't that strength protect the people I rule? He cried out, slicing the Koloss clean through the waist, if only to show that he could. The beast fell into two gory pieces. Why? Elland thought with rage. What strength must I possess? What must I do to protect them? Vin's words, spoken months ago back in Vitisha, returned to him. She called everything he did short-term. But what more could he do? He was no slayer of gods, no divine hero of prophecy. He was just a man. and it seems these days ordinary men, even allomancers, weren't worth very much. He screamed as he killed, ripping through another pack of Kolos, and yet, like his efforts back at Fadrix, he just didn't seem like enough. Around him the village still burned, and as he fought he could hear women crying, children screaming, men dying. Even the efforts of a Mistborn were negligible. He could kill and kill, but that would not save the people of the village. He screamed, pushing out with the soothing, yet the Kolos resisted him. He didn't bring even a single one under his control. Did that mean an Inquisitor controlled them? Or were they simply not frightened enough? He fought on, and as he did, the prevalence of death around him seemed a metaphor for all he had done over the last 3 years. He should have been able to protect his people. He tried so hard to protect his people. He'd stopped armies, overthrown tyrants, reworked laws, and scavenged supplies, and yet all of that was a tiny drop of salvation in the vast ocean of death, chaos, and pain. He couldn't save the Empire by protecting a corner of it, just as he couldn't save the village by killing a small fraction of the Kolos. I don't know. I don't have much to talk about here other than I just really like the writing here.
Mm-hmm.
I like it is a little on the nose in that like this is a metaphor. However, I think it's spot on for Elland to be drawing metaphors because he's the most studied and like literary of just about any character. And I just like the idea of like Ellen's character in this book in particular is just the frustrated guy, right? Like this guy who's been trying so hard. The entire last book was this measure of how learning how to become the ruler that the world needs, and he's just being consistently thrown up against choices that suck and don't matter. Like even it's like an impossible choice to make, and at the end of the day, even if you make it, nothing improves, and it's just like frustration after frustration after frustration, no progress, nothing's happening. You are supposed to be one of the most powerful people in the world, and you feel utterly powerless. I don't know. I just really like that's the part of his character that I really grasped on in this story in particular.
Yeah, I could empathize with it. It wasn't as interesting to me as a guiding plot line as the last book, but it was honestly more interesting to me than what was going on with Kelsier, who, again, I've complained more than enough about how like I just get bored when the character is like, I can kill everyone. It's easy for me. Like, okay, good for you.
Like, I still don't know what the book's obsession was just making people Mistborns were. Like, I don't think Elland needed to be a Mistborn in this book. But
yeah, I kind of agree. Like what I guess I don't know what else he would have been doing if he hadn't been a Mistborn. Like, but
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I
don't know.
They would have had a hard time justifying him being like out in the field. Although I think, like, I get it because it's like in the entire of the second book, he felt powerless, even though he was king of the city. Then he's emperor and the most powerful Mistborn in the world, and it doesn't matter. It's still power. Like the concept of power at this point is everything that we thought mattered doesn't.
Kyrgyzstan answers your question in chat. The answer is Mistborn are cool.
I suppose.
Yeah.
Spook gets to be one at the end of the book.
Yeah.
Throwing them out like candy.
Yeah. So you know, like the thing is, as I'm looking at this text, I'm like, this is a bit much. But the thing is, when this scene was actually happening, it worked for me just fine. And I don't really know. I don't really have anything super smart to say about this because I just find that quite often, like if you take something out of context and kind of stare at it, it can seem like corny and over the top and too on the nose and so forth. But actually, when I was at this part in the book, this was the kind of writing that was appropriate to create the feelings that needed to be created at that moment, right? So. I don't know. It's just interesting because definitely you can almost always isolate a small piece of writing and be like, look at this, and it's like, yeah, that's not really useful actually.
I mean,
often
it's certainly melodramatic, but I think you're absolutely right that fits in the moment. Like,
yeah,
he's literally screaming in frustration via mass monster murder. And then I love, like, I didn't pull it, but the moment where Preservation comes to him in like her final moments of existence to like help to push him the little bit further he needs, when he like sinks down into the ash and has completely given up hope. I thought that was really beautiful, and that's right after this scene.
Yeah. So it's kind of a small bit of this page actually, but the idea that like the Colossus, you don't have to kill all of them, you just have to kill enough that they're scared, then you can suborn them. I thought that was a fun like little game mechanic to the story.
It was cool. I mean, like the opening of the book is this really cool scene where like Elland shows up to this tiny little town and is like, "Don't worry, we got this. Charge them." And like, and it's insane, and then they just take them over, and I think that pays off really nicely at the end too, when Ruin just takes them all back, and it's just like, haha, fuck you. You felt safe. Nope.
Right, it was all a trick.
Yep.
Actually, that's one thing we didn't talk about the beginning of the book, is that we're seeing Elland after a time skip basically, and we're seeing him from the outside, and he has come to embody everything that his tutor, what's your face, could have ever asked. Right? He's this leader. He knows how to lead men. He knows how to seem commanding, and he even seems to have internalized it.
Yeah.
He just is this guy now, and we get the sense immediately, like, oh, we're gonna have to get to know Elland again, because this isn't quite the same Elland that we left, actually.
Yeah, and I like the book kind of wrestles with the person that he's becoming too, because he's having to make these decisions over and over again, and I think it says directly he's afraid that he's becoming more and more like the Lord Ruler, and I think that allows you in this the Lord Ruler pity party that is this book allows you to kind of see how a man could become that person, right?
Yeah.
When you're consistently up against this and have to make decisions like this, and I think there's talk about like you have to be okay being like not losing either side of you. You're the Emperor part, and then you're the Elland part, and both those parts are important to you, and you need both of them in making your decisions. And I love how that pays off at the end, because he doesn't decide to attack the city, and because he doesn't decide to attack the city, Ruin's plan is kind of thrown off a little bit, and they survive to fight another day, and then that's how they're able to have the eating contest that finishes the book, because that's how the good guys win, is they have an Atium eating contest.
Yeah. Yeah, I think probably the most interesting Elland plot point in the story is when he confronts his old friend who used to be in a philosophy club with him, and his friend is basically condemning him for violating his ideals. And he's like, look, like if I had stuck to those ideals, X, Y, and Z terrible things would have happened. I needed to do this. And then it does it puts him in a place where he can understand that sometimes there are just no good choices.
Right. I mean, sometimes you have to be the person that makes the callous, cruel choice.
Yeah.
But not every time, right?
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Toby. Where Kelsier is the Machiavellian idea of the hero being badass and seeming good, Elland is the next iteration where he has the badass, etc., while also having the compassion and goodness. Yeah. And, I mean, like, there's talks about, like sometimes in leading, compassion and goodness can be bad things. And I think it's true. Sometimes you have to make the compassionless choice, but that doesn't mean every time. And I think it saves him in the end that he is both the Emperor and Elland.
In fact, I might revise what I said before and say, like, it's not that this isn't our Elland anymore. It's that this is the story of him finding his way back to, or finding his way to a synthesis of the ruler Elland and the old Elland.
Would you say ruin and preservation?
Yes.
Everything has a balance, right? I mean, like, balance is a big part of the story, right? That there are two sides to everything, and there is a balance that must be achieved in the middle of each of them. And I think that is the sides of Elland that he's trying to figure out. The preservation side of him and the ruin side of him.
I like it. I'm going to assume that was done that way intentionally. All right, next slide. Spook, at the end of his road, finally realizes that the Kelsier he's been talking to all this time might not be real. Now you must kill her,
Oh,
Kelsier said.
shit. I was not expecting that.
Spook looked up, blood seeping from the cut on the side of his face where the thug had grazed him. Blood dripped from his chin. What? You want power, Spook? Kelsier said, stepping forward. You want to be a better Allomancer? Well, power must come from somewhere. It is never free. This woman is a coin shot. Kill her, and you can have her ability. I will give it to you. Spook looked down at the weeping woman. He felt surreal, as if he were not quite there. His breathing was labored, each breath coming in a gasp, his body shaking despite his pewter. People chanted his name. Quellion was mumbling something. Beldra continued to cry. Spook reached up with his bloodied hand, ripping off his blindfold, spectacles tumbling free. He stumbled to his feet, looking out over the city, and saw it burning. The sound of riding echoed through the streets. Flames burned in a dozen different spots, lighting the mists, casting a hellish haze over the city. Not the fires of rebellion at all, the fires of destruction. This is wrong, Spook whispered. You will take the city, Spook, Kelsier said. You will have what you always wanted. You'll be like Elland and like Vin. Better than either. You'll have Elland's titles and Vin's power. You'll be like a god. Spook turned away from the burning city as something caught his attention. Quellion was reaching out with his good arm, reaching toward Kelsier. Please, Quellion whispered. It seemed as if he could see the survivor, though nobody else around them could. My lord Kelsier, why have you forsaken me? Such a good moment.
It's a really good moment. I like Kyrgyzstan says in the chat that it's a very on the nose metaphor with Spook literally ripping the blindfold off in his moment of clarity. Yes. Sometimes on the nose metaphors work though, and it is one that I really like in that. It's so ironic though because he is wearing glasses. Like he's got a blindfold and glasses, and he rips both of them off. And it's like one is blinding, the other is designed to help you see better.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's
kind of like balance, harmony. I'm just gonna say that for every thread now.
It's like balance. It rhymes.
It's like two sides of the same coin.
Sure.
I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. If God came and talked to me in that voice you just read for Kelsier, I probably wouldn't listen.
Yeah, I was just trying to emphasize and see the thing about the audiobook reader. I don't really have a problem with this audiobook reader. The one real problem I had was doing the Sazed accent. But he does a very evil voice for Vision Kelsier.
Even before we know. That's funny.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like Kelsier, but it also sounds evil. So,
we haven't talked about like this part of the book very much. Like with everything that's been going on in the city, we're at the end of it here, right? Where he realizes, and then he just heroically rips his metal out, and then does the same for Quellion and saves him. I thought this part of the book was really cool. There's a lot going on here. This is such a dense book as far as movements of the plot, but we see Sazed kind of get to like care about something again, where he works on the canal system. Spook has like become a god basically, and he's dealing with that. We have this Beldre, this girl that Spook's really into, and like she's kind of what saves him, I think, in the end.
Yeah.
Like, the idea that Kelsier would want him to kill her specifically.
Yeah, right. I think it's a recurring beat that Ruin does not actually understand humans very well,
right?
And like he's decent at manipulating people, but he seems to always push too hard.
Yeah, I mean, there's a confidence there, right? Like again and again, Ruin is foiled by like just the people's better judgment.
Yeah.
Also, when you're like, no, you must stab her through her and then stab that same part into you. It's the only way to kill her. What?
Yeah, right. Hold on a second.
Yeah. Seems like something's going on here.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah. I think the truth is Ruin just has a low opinion of humans or whatever, and doesn't understand empathy. So
yeah, I think you're right. All right, let's talk about Faith again.
Okay.
This is Sazed, who has now found the first generation of the Kandra, and he's talking to them about his struggles. For some time now, I have been searching through the religions of mankind, trying to ascertain which of their teachings were true. I had begun to despair that I would ever find a religion that offered the answers I sought. Then I learned that my own religion still existed, protected by the Kandra. I came here, hoping to find the truth. This is the truth, one of the Kandra says. That's what every religion teaches, Sazed said, frustration mounting. Yet in each of them I find inconsistencies, logical leaps, and demands of faith I find impossible to accept. It sounds to me, young one, Haddock said, that you're searching for something that cannot be found. The truth? Sazed said. No, Haddock replied. A religion that requires no faith of its believers. Another of the Kandra elders nodded. We follow the Father and the first contract, but our faith is not in him. It's in something higher. We trust that preservation planned for this day, and that his desire to protect will prove more powerful than Ruin's desire to destroy. But you don't know, Sazed said. You are offered proof only once you believe. But if you believe, you can find proof in anything. It's a logical conundrum. Faith isn't about logic, son, Haddock said. Perhaps that's your problem. You cannot disprove the things you study, any more than we can prove that the hero will save us. We simply must believe it, and accept the things preservation has taught us. So I'm guessing you don't like this explanation, Matt.
I mean, I don't find it like it doesn't affect me at all, but I guess I bought that it would be satisfactory for Sazed at this moment, and that's all that really mattered.
The thing is, it's not in this moment, though.
Well, that's true, yeah.
In this moment, Sazed's like, okay, I got other shit to worry about right now.
Yeah.
I'll deal with this nonsense later.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain type of person who you may be talking to right now where if you say faith isn't about logic, son, they're going to react by being like,
I'm out.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. Thanks for saying it all clearly like that so I can just tap out. But I mean, yeah, it's...
But I mean, like, the concept of faith as a general principle is that it is impossible to know. But
yeah,
like,
I mean, I don't know, I don't find offensive the idea that like you should be optimistic and that it's better to believe that good things will happen than that bad things will happen, even if you actually have a lot of evidence that bad things will happen. It's better to focus your mind on the good things and work toward those, right? Like that's just pragmatic. That's not even religion.
Sure.
So yeah, I don't really have like a huge problem with any of this. I was like, yeah, sure. I buy that these people believe this. It's realistic. I buy that this is part of Sazed's journey, and it's good world building. So
yeah. All right. Well, let's move on.
Okay.
There's a moment of my embarrassment.
Marsh's time has finally come, and as he kills Vin at Ruin's command, the puzzle pieces finally slide together. Kelsier treated her like a daughter, he thought as he broke her fingers one at a time. She was screaming, the daughter he never had with Mare. I've given up, just like I did with the rebellion. It was the greatest shame of his life. Years ago, before the collapse, he had led the Ska rebellion, but he'd given in. He'd withdrawn, given up leadership of the group. And he'd done it only a year before the rebellion, with Kelsier's help, finally overthrew the final empire. Marsh had been its leader. He'd given up just before the victory. No, he thought as he broke the fingers on her other hand. Not again. No more giving up. His hand moved up to her collarbone, and then he saw it, a single bit of metal glittering in Vin's ear, her earring. She'd explained it to him once. I don't remember it, Vin's voice whispered to him from the past, a memory of when Marsh himself sat with her on a quiet veranda at Mansion Renault, watching Kelsier organize a caravan below just before Marsh left to infiltrate the ranks of the Steel Ministry. Vin had spoken of her insane mother. Reen said that he came home one day and found my mother covered in blood, Vin had said. She'd killed my baby sister. Me, however, she hadn't touched, except to give me an earring. Don't trust anyone pierced by metal, Spook's letter. Even the smallest bit contained a man. The smallest bit. As he looked closer, the earring, though twisted and chipped, looked almost like a tiny spike. He didn't think. He didn't give Ruin time to react. Amid the thrill of killing the hero of ages, Ruin's control was weaker than it had ever been. Summoning all the will he had remaining, Marsh reached out and ripped the earring from Ben's ear.
You know what's the most frustrating thing about this with me? I distinctly remember at some point in the book saying, "Hey, how come Vin can see Ruin? That doesn't make any sense. I wonder if they're ever going to explain that. I'm stupid."
Don't be too hard on yourself, Scott. I mean, it's an element that's always there, but like it's an earring. Earrings are just something that exists in the real world. They're not a fantasy element. Couldn't possibly. It's different.
It's not like the earring has been an important element of the story since the very beginning. That talked about like how dangerous it is for Mistborn to carry metal on them, and yet Vin seemed like eerily obsessed with keeping this earring with her, considering the fact that it was her mother's, and her mother was a crazy person that she thought was gonna kill her, and it doesn't make any sense, and I was completely fooled. And in that moment, I think, like, look, you guessed it beforehand, right? Like, you saw this coming.
Yeah, I saw it coming. I think I made the analogy to spikes and the earring during the previous book. Yeah.
But I mean, the thing that I think it works regardless. Like, I think if you knew it was coming like you, or if you were taken by surprise and just smacked your head like me, I think this moment really works. And the reason I think this moment really works is because it comes on the back of Marsh's big moment, right?
Yeah.
One thing we haven't talked about throughout this book is that we've dropped into Marsh's head a few times and seen where he's like failing to resist, but he's holding on to his strength, and he's saying, "Okay, I'll resist like later, like like at the perfect time, at the perfect time, at the perfect time, and this is it. This is the time." So it's like, especially since we get this primer beforehand about like Marsh's embarrassment at his failure, like my brother came in and scooped up the rebellion that I had been leading my entire life, and then won, and I was embarrassed, and like this is my moment of redemption. And we hear like, didn't Mare, like, didn't he like her too? And then Kelsier took her as well.
Yeah, and he gave up on that too. I agree. Marsh, I kind of forgot he was a POV character, but he's a great one actually. He's like, you feel his struggle. It's tragic that he keeps losing himself, and like you see him commit to this idea that he's going to break free at the opportune moment, and then it kind of seems like that he's not going to actually be able to. Like I think like the worst part is when he murders the guy who's bringing the message.
Yeah. Oh God, that was like, you're like, fuck, right? Like, like it's this one moment where you're like, okay, this is Spook's role in the book, right? He's gonna get this message delivered. The message is gonna get there right on time, and everything's gonna be okay. And he intercepts it, and you're like, shit.
But and that's what's funny is I knew about the earring, but I didn't make the prediction at that point. Oh, but now Marsh knows that message, and now Marsh is going to be the one who acts on that information. I didn't make that connection. So
Marsh's characterization is I like it too, because Sanderson could have done this thing where like Marsh is like doing all these things that he doesn't want to do, and he's like sitting inside his own body, horrified and disgusted. But I thought it was a very interesting choice that I liked a lot, to make it so Ruin's influence on him makes him enjoy it. He likes it. He likes all the terrible things he's doing, and there's this contradiction inside of him where he's holding off, he's waiting, he's biding his time, but at the same time he's enjoying this. Like he's like in these moments he's breaking her fingers one by one, and he's enjoying it.
Ever smaller fraction of him resisting.
You
know, so one bit of the story, which if you ever reread this book, you will probably feel the same, but it was a bit frustrating when Vin is thinking through the times when she's been able to use the mists for power, and I was just like, ah, it's when you're not wearing the earring. It's when you're not wearing the earring. Then it's when you're not wearing the earring. And she's like thinking of all these other reasons why it is. Like, oh, maybe it's a time when I was close to death. And I was like, no, it's the earring. But that only obviously happens if you know it's the earring in
Yeah,
advance.
I mean,
So,
I don't know. Like, I don't pay attention to what jewelry I'm wearing at different times in my life.
right,
So
right,
if
right.
someone was telling me like, oh yeah, what are the 2 times that this happened to me? Was I wearing my wedding ring?
Yeah, was I wearing my watch on
Yeah,
that day? Yeah,
yeah.
right.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so I understand why that would feel that way. Yeah, I was
yeah.
just like, yeah, what's going on with these mists? I really liked. It was mentioned again ahead by a little bit before by Kirkstan, but I really liked the reveal of this mystery about why she could pierce the copper clouds. Right. It turns out her sister was a copper, whatever,
Yeah, copper burner,
whatever. Yeah,
a
and so
seeker.
she got like super double style of that via
Yeah,
the earring. I thought that was like sometimes answers don't need to be solved, but when they're done in satisfying ways, or it's not just like she could do this because she was special. No, it's
yeah, right. I actually did appreciate that quite a bit. That it wasn't just like, well, she is the chosen one. I mean,
right.
she kind of is the chosen one, but
She's a
it's
chosen
actually
one.
yeah, it's actually bad. Like it was a curse almost. It's the result of her poor dead murdered baby sister.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not a cool thing. And
Yeah,
in fact, when she takes the earring out, that power's gone. So
yeah, that's true. All right, so let's do Ellen's big Atium moment as one of the final mysteries of the book locks into place. A ruler's most basic duty was to protect his people. In this one area, Elland continually felt impotent, useless. Why can't I do it? Ellen thought with frustration. I spent a year searching out storage caverns to provide food, only to end up trapped with my people starving. I search all the time looking for the Atium, hoping to use it to buy safety for my people. And then I find it too late to spend it on anything. Too late. He paused, glancing back towards the metal plate on the floor. Years searching for Atium. None of the other metals Demoe had given the soldiers had worked. Ellen had been working under the assumption that Demoe's group would be like the other Mistfallen back in Fadrix, that they'd be composed of all kinds of mistings. Yet, there had been something different about Demoe's group. They had fallen sick for far longer than the others. Ellen pushed forward, rushing past Sazed, grabbing a handful of beads. A vast wealth, unlike anything any man had ever possessed. Valuable for its rarity, valuable for its economic power, valuable for its allomancy. Demoe, he snapped, rising and tossing the bead at him. Eat this. Demoe frowned. My lord? Eat it, Ellen said. Demoe did as asked. He stood for a moment. 300 men, Ellen thought, sent away from my army because all of the ones who felt sick, they were the most sick. 16 days. 327 men, 1/16 of those who fell sick, 1 out of 16 allomantic metals. Yeoman had proven that there was such a thing as an Atium misting. If Ellen hadn't been so distracted, he would have made the connection earlier. If 1 out of the 16 who fell sick remained that way the longest, would that not imply they gained the most powerful of the 16 abilities? Demoe looked up, eyes widening, and Ellen smiled. Woo!
yay.
Atium food fight.
Yeah. I mean, Sanderson's good at lining up these moments toward the end of stories,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
This felt awesome.
It
It's
did, and they come one after another, right? Like this, the last 60 to 50 pages of this book is like bam, 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 with these
yeah,
reels and like perfect moments of build up. It really pays off. I loved this. I mean, I love like the one we talked at the beginning about. I didn't like this book as much as the other two is because like the main thrust of the plot I felt like didn't have this hook in it as much.
uh,
Like the hook of the first one is, are they going to be able to overthrow the final emperor? The hook of the second one is, are they going to be able to protect their city? They've gotten into this pickle, and the hook in this one is what's going like this central mystery with the mist. I think like it's the thing that carries you through the story is like when we start doing this thing like weird numbers and how it's like exactly this 16 and what does that mean. And I thought the reveal that they were mistings was a great reveal, and then of course the ATM mistings was just perfect.
yeah,
um
Right. And the thing we're going to get to in a second, that it's of course nice that suddenly they have a whole bunch of Atium mistings to defend them, but the real twist is that what happens with the Atium when you use it for Allomancy.
Right. It goes bye-bye.
Yep.
It burns up.
And then Ruin is mad. Poor Ruin.
Ruin doesn't get Ruin's body back.
Yeah, I know. It's so sad, such a tragedy. So yeah, that was fun. That was a fun moment.
Yeah, and now we're gonna get another one because it's like we're bam, 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 bam. Here's another huge reveal. The Sazed is the hero reveal.
Yep. Sazed finds his faith, and yeah, I'm no hero, he whispered, still reaching up to the sky. His arms twinkled golden. His copper mines, worn on his forearms, reflected the light of the sun. They had been with him for so long, his companions, his knowledge. Knowledge. The words of the prophecy were very precise, he thought suddenly. They say that the hero will bear the future of the world on his arms. Not on his shoulders, not in his hands. On his arms. By the forgotten gods! He slammed his arms into the twin mists and seized the powers offered to him. He drew them in, feeling them infuse his body, making him burn. His flesh and bones evaporated, but as they did, he tapped his copper mines, dumping their entire contents into his expanding consciousness. The copper mines, now empty, dropped with his rings to the pile of blue corpses beside the bodies of Vin, Elland, and Ruin's nameless body. Sazed opened eyes as large as the world itself, drawing in power that latticed all of creation. The hero will have the power to save the world, but he will also have the power to destroy it. We never understood. He wouldn't simply bear the power of preservation. He needed the power of ruin as well. The powers were opposites. As he drew them in, they threatened to annihilate each other. And yet, because he was of one mind on how to use them, he could keep them separate. He could touch without destroying each other, if he willed it. For those two powers had been used to create all things. If they fought, they destroyed. If they were used together, they created. It's cool. It's a cool moment. Everything about it is awesome.
Yeah. I love, I mean, like, obviously, like, we were talking about good and evil, right? And creation and destruction. But I mean, Sanderson did not choose those terms, right? Preservation and ruin is what he's interested in talking about here. Like,
yeah,
not destruction and creation, but keeping things together and ruining stuff.
Yeah.
And how those two things are part, like, not even in this world, in all worlds. Like the desire to preserve and the desire to ruin, and how those things can pay off. It can work together to destroy or work together to create.
Yeah, I mean,
because, like, you think, like, creation is a form of destruction, is it not?
Exactly. I think that you could even call ruin change,
Sure.
and it wouldn't really change the moral too much, because, I mean, Ruin's obsession is with everything being kind of chaos, and he's definitely trying to push everything toward a kind of entropy and nothingness. That's true, but fundamentally, preservation is about everything being static, which is also anathema to real dynamic life and so forth. So, John says, I feel like Mormons make the best made up swear words. Everybody in the chat is really enjoying by the forgotten gods.
I love that. Yeah, nobody says any bad words. They say by the forgotten gods, or they say Lord Ruler.
Lord Ruler, which funnily they're still saying even at this point.
Yeah. Well, it's ingrained in you for.
Yeah. Well,
I think it's funny that the Lord Ruler would just be cool with him being a swear word.
Yeah, right. Isn't there a moment in the previous book where they're like, we should probably stop using that as a epithet?
I think so.
And then they just keep doing it in this book, which again, like you said, is very realistic, actually.
Old habits.
Yeah.
So Sazed saves the world. I didn't pull any out of the slides out of Vin being a god, because I mean that part of the book didn't interest me that much. But it is kind of funny, the concept of like, oh fuck, I got rid of all the ash, and now it's too hot. Let me move the earth. Oh no, too far.
Yeah, right.
And like I think
Yeah.
in a later part we cut to, I think maybe it's Elland, but someone just on the world, and it's like, and suddenly it got dark.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a minute.
Right. Yeah, right. I mean, it's funny because it's like apocalyptic omens is like and then suddenly the day came as night, and it's like it's
Right.
because Vin is like turning knobs frantically
Yeah.
in heaven. I thought it kind of was terrible when like the tsunami she makes a tsunami that wipes out like a civilization or whatever. And
Yep.
you're like, oh,
Oops.
oh goodness.
She's
Um,
learning.
it's part of the rehabilitating the Lord Ruler aspect of the book, where it's like, look,
Right.
see, Vin did the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You try it, huh?
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know. I thought this paid off really well. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, me too.
And then we move to our epilogue. I am, unfortunately, the hero of ages, read the delicate, careful letters. Spook thought he recognized the handwriting. As he flipped through the book, a slip of paper fell free. Spook picked it up. One side had a faded drawing of a flower, the very picture he'd been thinking about moments before. On the other side was a note scrawled in the same handwriting as the book. Spook, it read. I tried to bring them back, but apparently fixing the bodies doesn't return the souls. I will get better at this with time, I expect. However, be assured that I have spoken with our friends, and they are quite happy where they are. They deserve a rest, I think. This book contains a short record of the events that led up to the world dying and being reborn, along with some musings I have made about the history, philosophy, and science of recent occurrences. If you look to your right, you will find a much larger group of books in the grass. These contain all of the knowledge, repeated verbatim, that was contained in my metal mines. Let the knowledge of the past not be forgotten. Rebuilding will be difficult, I think, but likely far easier than living beneath the Lord Ruler or surviving ruins attempt to destroy the world. I think you'll be surprised at the number of people who fled the storage caverns. Rashek planned very well for this day. He suffered much beneath Ruin's hand, but he was a good man who ultimately had honorable intentions. You did well. Know that the message you sent via Captain Goradel saved us all in the end. The people will need leadership in the years to come. Likely, they will look to you. I'm sorry I cannot be there in person to help you, but know that I am about. I have made you a Mistborn, and healed the damage you did to your body by flaring tin so much. I hope you don't mind. It was Kelsier's request, actually, considering it a parting gift from him. Watch over them for me. P.S. There are still 2 medals that nobody knows about. You might want to poke about and see if you can figure out what they are. I think they'll interest you. So I just thought this was kind of cute. Just a fun way to end the book.
Yeah, I mean, I like the heaven is real. That everybody's fine.
Yeah,
Kelsier's here. He says hi.
I made you a Mistborn because of what Kyrgyzstan said before. Because they're cool. Why not?
Because Mistborn are cool, and yeah, and now
but is he gonna be like 1,000 years removed Mistborn, or is he gonna be like OG swallows some well metal Mistborn?
It's probably the latter, because Sazed is God, and yeah.
It would be funny if he's like, I made you a Mistborn, like the shitty kind.
Yeah, right. I figured that would be good enough for you, Spook.
But I mean, I think this is really interesting though, because like it kind of brings everything around. Like the medals is a fun like call to adventure, right? There's still 2 medals out there, and yeah, I know there's another series that happens after this one, but and you could call it a hook for the future, but I think it's just like the adventure goes on type of thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it actually would have felt too clean if we had found out, there's going to be 16 medals, and we find out what all the medals are, and we find out every single last detail of every bit of world building.
Yeah.
This actually feels more like realistic, and the idea that we end this series not knowing absolutely everything.
Yeah, and I mean we talk about the idea of leadership here, and that like the people will need a leader. You will be it, Spook. Like they're gonna look to you. Like that ties in a lot of what the story has talked about is the idea of how do people lead, what is leadership, and now we have Spook, the unsuspecting person. Is gonna be our leader, and I don't know. It was a really great way to tying everything together.
Yeah,
to me.
Yeah, felt nice. They got the knowledge. They're in a beautiful grassy meadow. Everything's green.
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly what they all wanted. Yeah, it's a nice happy ending.
And presuming the Bible that's going to be in every hotel in the future is going to be this book here written by Sazed
Yeah,
himself.
right. And it's factually 100% correct
Hey,
uh, this time.
yeah.
So
Hey, Matt,
yeah,
why does he say
uh
unfortunately? That's my question.
I think because he has to die.
I
I
mean, he's
I don't
not
know.
dead, Matt. He's God.
Well, he doesn't get to be a man anymore.
Oh, yeah, that's a bummer. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something, Matt. You want to be this, or you want to be a god? Oh, that's a really tough decision. I can't.
Uh-huh.
I don't know.
Well,
I don't know what
I
I'm gonna
mean,
do. I'm gonna
I
be
mean, I'm
really
on.
bummed. I'm gonna be really bummed. I am unfortunately a god.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he's being kind of classic Sazed, tongue in cheek. In fact, I think there's another point. Okay, like because I noticed from the very beginning this wording of I am unfortunately the hero of ages.
Hmm.
Um, I noticed a later point in the book where Sazed says like I am unfortunately something something. Now I can't remember what the context was or anything really other than that, but it definitely happened, and I felt like it was a Sazedism that is just being shoved in our face. So that I think that's all it is. I think it's a Sazedism.
Yeah. Yeah, but like, he's a god.
Toby says Sazed's self-esteem is still shaky.
That's.
That's a perfect explanation because it makes no sense. But yeah, that's it. That's it. Uh,
Mhm.
we need a spook-centric novella. Toby says.
No, 100%,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, and it should be entirely written in his uh, slum speech.
Tringard points out that Sazed didn't like titles, and now he has this title. That's fantastic. That's great.
I mean, you know what he could do? Just erase the title from existence
Yeah,
because he's a god.
yeah, yeah. Not just a god.
He's the god.
The god.
He is.
The
He is God.
yeah.
He is the Judeo-Christian God.
uh, all right. We'll hang out and have some Q&A for a minute, I guess.
Thousands of years later, he's going to send his only son to America.
That's how that happened. I mean the Christian, the whole idea of Jesus sacrifice and becoming God is viewed as a sacrifice and not just like Jesus being like finally, so
Yeah, but he had to be nailed to a cross for hours. It was very painful.
yeah, but then he got to be God. So
But
I
Sazed
mean
just like reached into some
some
mist.
yeah, that's true.
Just like,
Fair enough.
sweet.
Yeah, I mean, really, nothing bad ever happened to Sazed in the whole book, other than Tindawel dying, which was actually not Sazed; it was Tindawel.
I
So
mean, I think he suffered quite a lot. I mean, nothing literally happened to him, but he went through a whole bunch of shit.
I don't know, Scott. This feels pretty unearned. The dude melted. Okay, fine.
Sazed got off light. Yeah, I mean, he didn't get his head chopped off. Do you think, like, during the Atium battle, anyone was like, their belly got full? How much Atium was in
Okay,
there?
I didn't really want to talk about this because it doesn't matter, but I did notice. I was like, because I had this impression of this pit being like, thousands of barrels of
Yeah, I
Atium.
mean, I assume like like 1,000 years of stocking Atium, right?
Yeah, but I think the reality is we were meant to kind of be like, yeah, but also they've been rationing it out and burning it via mistings and Mistborn this whole time, and then also that like you just get Atium in such small amounts that
Yeah,
maybe 1,000 years of Atium really is just like a few gallons, and then you can distribute that between 300 people or whatever
sure.
pretty easily.
How big is a bead in your mind? For some reason, I made it marble sized, and that felt like too big.
I'm helpfully holding up my fingers to the camera for our podcast audience. Yeah, I think about marble, about like a child's marble size, not a big marble, a small marble. That's kind of what I'm imagining.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting because like I don't want to say there's inconsistency because I haven't really thought it through actually, but like clearly sometimes they drink metal shavings in liquid, and that's got to be a pretty small amount of metal. But then
Yeah.
they talk about beads, and a bead is probably a lot more than a vial of shavings.
Yeah,
So
I think Atium, as people are saying in chat, just burns like
really
insanely
fast.
quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, which I guess helps in this situation.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I would just just imagining someone like taking like 10 pounds of it and then running out like with a sloshy tummy full of
Oh
metal.
god. Yeah, like I can see all the attacks coming, but I'm just so sluggish.
Like, do you burn it all at once? Like, how? Like, can you burn it all at once and then it like stacks? I'm gamifying this, but
I think only if you had Dramon.
like, do you have to like burn each bead independently of each other, or can you
I
just say I'm gonna? Do you just turn ATM burning on
I
and
think
it
you
just?
just think you just turn it on. Yeah.
I just want imagine someone with a sloshy tummy full of metal fighting a giant monster.
Other people are saying they think of a bead as being like the size of a BB.
Yeah, I can see that.
Some
I
people
mean,
say pea
the
sized.
one guy's wearing one on his head, right? So if it's like a
It's it's got to be big enough to fit into a like a jewelry
yeah.
thing. Like when you put a bead of cooling metal on a CPU. No, I think that's way too small. That's way smaller than I was imagining. Everyone but me is wrong about the size of a bead. All right, so let's just let's just end that
All
conversation.
right.
Um,
Anything we didn't talk about that you guys wanted us to talk about? This was a very there's a big book, and there was a lot there, and I couldn't pull everything, and I limited myself, and we're still at 2 hours anyway. So
yep, that's how it goes.
we're just gonna talk about bead sizes
We,
forever.
we're just talking about bead sizes.
Look, here's all I want. I want an adaptation of this book where someone complains about their sloshy ATM tummy.
Yeah,
That's all I want.
right. We
Do
get
that for me.
we, we get a sudden point of view from a new character at the end of the book, as it's just one of the other soldiers who's a new ATM misting, who's just as he's fighting complaining about how much his stomach hurts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want that.
I want, I want him. I want one of the third. I want the ruin to win because one of the 300 people eats too much and pukes it back up,
Uh-huh.
and they miss those beads, and he gets the power and wins.
And he
That's what I
just
want.
needed if he just needed a little bit.
Yeah, I know. Elland can flare and use the
Duralin.
derailment, but none of the other people can.
Exactly. Metathulu. It's not the size of the bead, it's how you use it.
Okay, this has gotten weird.
All right,
Let's talk about
we're
next
done. Yeah.
month. All right, next month, the winning book by one vote. It was very, very close, but by one vote, The Left Hand of Darkness is going to be the month of September by Ursula K. Le Guin. We've read one Le Guin book before. That was the first Earthsea book, and I enjoyed that quite a bit. And I've heard this is a very good science fiction novel, so I'm very, very much excited for this. I'm not sure about this date yet. This was the last Friday of the month, so I went ahead and put it in there, but it's 2 days after Christmas, and I'm not 100% sure on this. So
That's gonna be tough, but we'll see.
we might move it around. Just check our Twitter, and if you're in the Discord, check Discord. But okay, we're getting questions. What would you want from the sequel? I don't know.
The sequel of this of the of
Yeah, of the next Mistborn. So we
oh
know it's hundreds of years in the future. So something
um
totally different.
yeah, I don't know. Great characters.
Yeah.
That's what I expect because Sanderson's good at that,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone keeps telling me that his books just get better over time, and I already like these, so I'm expecting it to be better. So basically, I'm expecting it to be really good. There.
Yeah, I don't know what I would do with it. Like, where would the story go? I hope it wouldn't be like a big, like, I wouldn't want to do the same type of story. I think there's a lot of different stories you could tell in this. What do we know about it? Nothing.
I don't know.
Anything. Yeah.
I don't know. All right.
Matt, what do you think the final two medals do? That's a question I want to ask you.
I didn't put any thought into it, honestly. I think if you like sat down and thought about what all of the medals do. There's like a pattern to it, and you could
Hmm.
probably figure out what the blank in the pattern is,
Yeah,
but I
they
didn't.
said because it's divided in four, right? And they said which blank is in the which quadrant, but
Yeah,
I don't remember.
I don't. I was like, I'll think about this later when I have like a piece of paper, and then I never did that. So
That's fair. One day, Children of Time will win. I'm not giving up.
yeah,
I'm not
and
giving up.
also Perdido Street Station, and also I think pretty much any book on the slate this month would have been fine by me. So
Yeah, yeah.
um,
Um, what else do we have? Yeah, so December 27th, tentatively, we might change that. We'll let you guys know. Um, so just check
check the calendar.
check it out. All right, guys, that is it. We're done. We did it. Um, thank you so much for everyone tuning in live. I really enjoyed this discussion. I hope you guys did. Uh, I hope you enjoyed reading the book. If you read it for the first time, um, 13. There's 13. I keep getting distracted by chat. There's 13 books in Mistborn, or are we just talking about
I
the Cosmere?
I don't know. We'll have to look into that later. If you like what we do here at Doof Media and you want to see more of it, head on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/Doof Media and consider donating $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. You can get access to our private Discord server as well as the ability to vote for which books we cover. Tons of other cool benefits. So go check that out.
That's right, guys. Once again, if you have any questions or comments or just want to reach out to us to talk about this book, next month's book, anything else, any books you want us to cover in the future, you can email us at doofmedia@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter at doofmedia, which is also where you can find the dates for the book club. You can also find that at doofmedia.com/calendar. You can see where all the stuff we do, especially our live events, on that calendar for any month. You can check that out there. All right, once again, thank you everyone for hanging out, and we will see you all next month. We did it.
Yay.
That was a good conversation.
Yeah. Done with Mistborn, I think.
I know, it's weird. I was looking back at the year of book club, and I forgot we did the first one of these so early. It was like May we did first Mistborn, and here we are at the end of the year, finishing up the trilogy.
Yeah. It's cool that we actually finished out the whole trilogy
Right now,
in the span of a year.
9 were planned in the beginning, but Brandon added 4 more. Right now, 6.5 are out. Brandon Sanderson,
Brandon.
you're out of control.
Brandon. Jeez.
Brandon, you've got so many series you're working on. The thing about Sanderson is I actually believe he will finish it, unlike most fantasy.
That's true. That's true.
This was a fun series. I enjoyed this trilogy a lot. It was a lot of fun. I'm glad we read them. Thank you, everyone who voted for these books.
Me too. Yeah. I mean, I'd always heard good things about them, and probably wouldn't have read them if we hadn't been forced by you fine folks.
Thanks for
And
forcing us to do things.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
usually good.
I think we probably will. We've said this a few times, but I think we probably will get around to doing Stormlight at some point.
Yeah.
But
Sierra said at the very beginning, they are very long books. They're like 1,200-page books. So that's going to push our limit for book club. But
true.
I think we can make it work.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Toby. If he doesn't finish his series, then he'll not finish all of them, and it'll be a beautiful disaster.
Yeah.
Maybe
it's just a ploy to stay alive forever, right?
Yeah.
Too many series to finish.
That doesn't work, but
it
sure.
It
might.
You don't know. I don't know how.
It's true. As long as you don't
works.
As long as you don't give up on the series, then you live forever. Mm-hmm. So that's why Robert Jordan didn't live. He had already given up.
A 2-parter, yeah, we probably wouldn't be able to make that work. That'd be kind of awkward.
Yeah.
I don't know. We might find a way to do it. I have the first 2 books. I'm staring at them right there down on my bookshelf because I got them for my birthday.
Oh. Cool.
Oh, man. I'm tired.
Me too.
I think I'm
Were
gonna
you
go.
going to say goodnight to everybody?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Josh. We might like announce if we do it. We might announce it ahead of time, like more ahead of time, and give people more time to read it.
Yeah, that could be one of the. I mean, we could just pick it for some particular month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
We can do whatever we want.
Yeah, but we'll give more people time. I think that's a good idea. All right, guys. We're gonna head out for the night, though. Set it up so it's done over 2 months with a shorter book for the first book club. Yeah, it's a good idea. We'll specifically pick a shorter book. I'm less worried about being able to read it in the allotted amount of time, and more worried about our ability to talk about it without feeling like we need to rip half the book out, or just gloss over stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
But we'll figure it out. We definitely want to do it. So, all right, guys. Thanks again for hanging out. It was very, very fun. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll be back next month. Like I said, we will figure out the date because probably 2 days after Christmas is not a good idea. But we'll figure out the date and let you guys know as soon as possible. See you around.